Legacy Living series. My name is Ron Siliko, and today I'm with my grandfather, Robert Schiavoni, and we're going to talk a lot about his life in this next series of videos that we're doing. You've heard me talk about this in the introduction to this channel, that preserving family history and talking about the stories, the traditions, where families came from, the struggles, the successes. It's such an important thing that we need to remember and carry on. I'm so thrilled and honored that we get to have these discussions because they're important.
Yeah.
We need to record these things, and we need to talk about them, and all generations need to see those. So, Grandpap, I'm so thankful you're doing this with me.
Yeah.
So, if you could, for the audience that may watch this, give us a little background at the beginning. Where were you born? What year were you born?
I was born in Masontown, PA, on May 9, 1933. And I'm 83 years old right now.
And how many siblings do you have?
5.
And how many are?
Oh, siblings. Well, there was 5. Well, there was 5 of us. 4 boys and 1 girl.
Okay.
The same as I got. I got 4 girls, or 3 girls. 4 girls and 1 boy. Yeah. But my family had 3 brothers and 1 sister, so they had 5 of us.
Okay.
And that's what I had, 5.
Yeah. Tell the audience about your parents. Roughly at what time? They were immigrants, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
They came from Italy, I guess, in the 20s, 1920 something. My father came here first. He worked in the coal mines in PA. Then he went back to Italy on a boat and picked my mother up. And that was back in 20s. I don't know what years.
Was this in Pennsylvania that he?
Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where is Masontown in Pennsylvania?
Southwestern part of the state.
Okay, so close to West Virginia.
Right.
Okay.
And West Virginia and Ohio borders, you know.
Okay.
And he might have came here in 1900s, 1919, something around in there.
Mm-hmm.
And he went back and got my mother 1923 or something like that. He owned a little store first, and then he had worked in the coal mines.
Okay.
Then later on, he bought this taxi service and bus line. We had a bus line, regular passenger line, and we had we used to take coal miners to work for U.S. Steel. And that's how I was raised. And then once I got my driver's license, I was busy driving school buses and going to school yet, and driving taxis at night. So
I think such a powerful story, and everyone's different. I guess first, what part of Italy did your family originate in, and what was the reason that your dad came to the United States?
well, my father was born in near Oscar-Piceni, Spelong. And that's where they had that earthquake about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Up in the mountains. And my mother was near the same area. Then they went to Rome. And then he came to this country for, for the good life.
Mm-hmm.
And after he got on his feet working in the coal mines and all that, he went back and got my mother.
Were there any relatives in the United States at that time, or did he just come on his own?
No, he came over here with he had a brother and a sister that came over here with him. Then he went back and got my mother. And well, his name was Dominic, and my mother was Gertrude. And that was in 22, 23, something like that.
Okay.
Well, I never knew too much about my mother.
Mm-hmm.
But I took her back to Italy about 30 years ago to visit
Mm-hmm.
her family. And we were up in the mountains there too. That was way up in the mountains. And that was where the earthquake was. And my father still owned land up there, and we just left the land to the other cousins or whatever. And I met one of my father's brothers up there at the time, because he was still living up there at that time. But all they had up in the mountains, they had marbles, quarries that they got the marbles. And I was surprised. The people up there had their homes, and I thought they had a lot of money because their floors are all marble. And their windowsills are all marble. I said, they must have money. And he said, this is cheaper than wood because the quarries are right down the street. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
And my one cousin he was a doctor, and his daughter and his son was a doctor. So we went visit them. They were not too far from Sophia Loren in Rome. But that's all I knew about my parents. And I met my cousins up there. And my one father's uncle. He would be my uncle, really. But he was light complected, blue eyes and all. Well, that's much as I knew. And I met a bunch of my cousins in Rome and all that stuff.
So were your mom and dad married when your dad came to the United States?
I think they got married. He went back and they got married, or they got married over here. But they were single at the time.
Okay.
Well, they might have been married. I don't know when they got married, really. I guess I never talked to them about it. Like you said, this is a good thing. And my children have been asking me about my past. So that's as far as I know about my parents.
So do you know roughly how old your dad was when he came over?
think when he died, he was 72. He died I say same time my first wife died. That would be into 65. Well, no. Uh, okay, I should. So I'm thinking back. That was. I'm trying to think when that was. My first wife died, and she was 32, and that was in 65, I believe it was. So he died in 65 because she got sick when I went to my father's funeral. And that's when she came up with she had come up with that uh, she had that cancer, pancreatic cancer. And that's when it showed up. She couldn't even go to my dad's funeral. So as soon as we came back to Cleveland, I put her in the hospital. She lasted only 3 or 4 weeks with the hepatitis and all. Well, no, they thought she had hepatitis. When they opened her up, she had the pancreatic cancer. They couldn't do nothing for her. Oh, so we'll say how old he was. So if he came over in the, let's say in the 20s, and he died at 72, and it's been 65.
So probably early to mid 30s.
He must have been in the 30s, yeah. In the 30s when he picked my mother up. So he was probably born in 1900 or something around in that area. Well,
So if he
18 something.
Yeah, so he's 72, he was born in 65. Yeah, late 1800s. Okay. I can't even imagine what the conversation around the dinner table's like when you're in Italy and you're just talking about picking up your life and moving to a brand new country.
Right.
I mean, I can't even imagine that.
Well, that's back in the 20s. There was a lot of people from Europe came to this country.
Mm-hmm.
But typical. I have a record over there. I can let you. I'll play it. To a typical Italian life.
Uh-huh.
We could play it in the background. Of a reservation town.
Mm-hmm.
We used to buy a live chicken every week. My dad and my mom used to buy a live chicken, and the milk was delivered to the house.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a guy that come around with women's clothes and the clothes he'd go out there on the street and buy them.
Mm-hmm.
It was, in the olden days.
Uh-huh.
The Iceman, at the time we never had refrigerators. We had an ice machine.
Right.
Ice box. Everything's on that record, I'll tell you about it. But We played in a playground, not right near our home.
Mhm.
No trouble. We didn't have the trouble like they have with children today.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew to come in at sundown. As long as we played around, my mom could see where we were at anyhow. And we played in the schoolyard there.
Mm-hmm.
But that was good old days.
So you have 3 brothers and a sister. What are their names? And if you could do it in birth order from oldest to
My
youngest.
oldest brother is Joseph. And he was 8 years older than I was.
Okay.
Then my second brother was Dominic, and he was 6 years older than I was.
So Joseph's born probably 1925. Dominic 1927.
Yeah. My oldest brother was conceived on a boat coming over here. So he was born about within a year after they came to this country. And
Hopefully they had some privacy.
well, they probably had a cabin or something on a boat. I don't know. That's how they traveled.
So they came over on a boat and then went to Ellis Island.
Ellis Island.
Like
I always wanted to go there because his name's on that
Okay.
word in there when he came over. And the third brother was Londo, and he was wait. The oldest brother was 6 years older than I was.
Okay. So he's born in 27.
And my other brother, second Dominic, was 4 years older than I was.
Okay, so 29.
And Londo, his name was Rolando, he was 2 years older than I was. And then it was me, and my sister was born 5 years after me.
So 38.
And her name was Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the 5 of us. Yeah. And that life at that time, the parents, my mom washed clothes on Monday, she ironed on Tuesday. Friday, they scrubbed floors and stuff like that. And Saturday, they finished. Friday and Saturday, they clean house all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Sunday was a day of rest.
So you mentioned, and this is such a fascinating story to me. Your father comes to the United States. He's a coal miner, but he quickly becomes a business owner.
Yes, he bought a little store.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think the name of that little store. I didn't even know about this till later. He talked about owning his store, and but he worked in a coal mine first, and it was what it made $2 or $3 a day or something like that. Then he bought this store. It was near Masontown, this little suburb. And then his sister's husband owned the taxis.
Okay.
And then when he died, my father bought the taxis off of my sister.
Okay.
Then later he bought this bus line. He used to take coal miners to work.
Okay.
On a bus. And then as we grew older, we was helping my dad run the bus line and taxis. He took care of the taxis, and then as we got older, we got running the buses, And then he couldn't drive taxi no more, so I ended up taking care of the taxis. Then my brother Dominic went to they drafted him to the service.
Okay.
That was in 50, 51. And I had just got out of school at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And they drafted him in the service. So I was running the bus line and, well, the taxis and the buses. So in the morning I'd take coal miners to work, and then I'd go to school, and then I'd come out of school and I'd run the taxis at night. But and I used to run this bus line to the little coal mining towns around Masontown. And that's where I met my first wife. She used to ride the bus back and forth to Masontown. Her and her mother, they go shopping, because Masontown was like the shopping area for them little coal mine towns.
Okay.
And then I, seen her going off and on the bus with her mother. And then later on, I'd be driving bus, and I'd see her and her girlfriend walking down the streets and everything, and I used to stop and talk to her and all that. And then when she was she must have been 16 or 17. They moved to Masontown they used to live in Gates, Gates Hill and Gates Bottom. Part of the towns we ran buses to the top and the bottom and all that. But and that's where I started dating her. And she used to, and I was driving taxi at that time in the evening. So I would pick her up. She'd be walking down the street, and I'd pick her up, and she'd sit in the taxis while I was driving taxis and with the bus terminal there. And that's how I started dating her. That was our date. And her mom didn't know that she was going with me. She was always with her girlfriend. Her girlfriend went to school with me. And her mother was good friends with the girlfriend's parents. They're just one street over from where they lived. And then I was still going to school at that time too. And she was going to a Catholic school in Electron. It's about 6 miles away from Masontown. But they were being bused back and forth. So I was a senior in school, and with the Catholic school and these nuns, I used to drive the kids' school bus. So she says, I was real good in the physics class, about electricity and how electricity, and I made a bell. So they put me in charge. She says, we can't start classes until you get here anyhow. She says, so you'll be in charge when you get here. And we lived next door to the school. And I'd just jump over the fence. I'd park the bus and jump over the fence and run into the school. And I'd ring the bell, start classes. And that was the first year we ever had a prom. And this nun asked me, "Can you dance?" I says, "No." She says, well, she taught me how to dance. She was teaching me and the other boys in the class and the girls. She was teaching us how to dance because we could go to the prom. And being I knew a little bit about electricity at the time, she put me in charge of decorating the gym. That's where we were going to have our prom. So we were putting these Chinese lanterns all around the gym. And up above, we had all the lights above. We put Chinese lanterns in them. And I installed them all. I wired them up and everything. And she says, I came to the last light way up top. I had this ladder that went up, I don't know, it must be 20-some feet. And I told her, I says, went to the last light. She said, now what do I do with these last two wires? She says, tie them together. I said, okay. I come down off the big ladder. And she says, being you did all the wiring and hanging all the lights, you can turn the switch on. So I went in there, turned the lights on. All the lights went on one by one all the way around. When it comes to the last light, it blew the fuse. And she said, oh, what's the matter? And I told the nun, I says, I don't think I was supposed to tie those two wires together. She says, you're right. So I go back up the ladder, take those two wires off, and put wire nuts on them so it wouldn't touch them. Then I come back down and turn the lights on, and they all stayed on. So that's how I started to be interested in electricity. Well, one of my neighbors was an electrician. I used to go with him and watch him do electrical stuff. That's how I got interested. And I was only 10, 12 years old. Then I told the nun about my girlfriend. He says, she asked me if I had a girlfriend. I says, well, sort of. I have a girl that I know. She was interested in coming to our Catholic school, but she was going to Lecron, which is about 5 miles away from where we were. And she was probably interested in going to school at our place rather than going all the way to Lecron. So she told me to bring her to school with me the next couple of days. So she used to come to school with me, and she sat in her class. And that's really how I started dating her. Never went out. She just rode around on the bus with me. And her parents never knew about it. They knew of me because they used to ride the bus. But her parents didn't want nothing to do with me. I had a hard time with some parents. So I asked her to go to the prom with me. And that's when they finally realized I was going with her. And we went to the prom and everything, and I come home from the prom, and I went to her house. It was about 11:30, 12 o'clock, and we sat in the front of the house in the car, and her brother come out and chased her in the house, told me, get out of here, you know. Didn't want nothing to do with me. At that time, you know, we were Italian, they were Slovak.
Okay.
And in the olden days, they wanted you to go with your own nationality. But in our family, my oldest one married an Italian. The second brother married an Irishman. My third married a Serbian. And I married a Slovak. And my Oh, my sister married a Polak. There's only one married an Italian. Okay, but that's what the old days were like. And I only could play with. I couldn't go to. My mother wouldn't. Nice Irish boy used to be a friend of mine. Invited me to a birthday party. My mother wouldn't let me go because they were Irish. You know, I didn't. I couldn't go. But that's what they were in the olden days. But my brother, they wanted to draft me in the service. My brother was in the service at the time.
Was this Korea?
In Korea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He was stationed in Germany at that time. But they wanted to draft me, and I went to my lawyer and insurance man, and he was a lawyer too. And I told him about it. He says, well, let me see if I can get you a deferment. So he got me a deferment because I had one brother who was in the service, and I was running the business for my dad.
Right.
I was only 20 years old at that time, I think it was. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was running the buses and the taxis, but I also was running the business, taking care of the books, and I was paying good money for mechanics.
Hmm.
So I talked to this friend of mine that used to work on the buses, but he worked for this garage,
Mm-hmm.
this Chrysler dealer, and he told me, why don't I start working on buses myself? So I bought one of these motor manuals, and he taught me how to overhaul motors and all that, and tune-ups and all that. And so I started doing all the mechanic work on the buses. So my brother got out of the service, and it wasn't 2 weeks after he got out that they drafted me.
Oh, wow.
So I had to go to service. So it was only 2 weeks till I was free. So I went to the service, and it was stationed in Camp Gordon, Georgia, near Augusta, Georgia. So I took my first 8 weeks of infantry training in Camp Gordon. Then I was transferred from Gordon to Camp Pickett, Virginia, for the medical corps. So I had a 3-day pass in transition. So I came home, and I had my uniform on and all. And that's when I went down to meet my girlfriend. And that's when her mother while I was gone, she knew I was gone with her daughter.
Uh-huh.
And I says, could I see Helen? She's sick. She's in bed. She has the flu. And I thought that was an excuse so I wouldn't get to see her. Because she didn't care for me because I wasn't Slovak. So I went up to, she let me go upstairs to see her. So I stayed with her till about 11 o'clock, 11:30, talking to her and all. And then I went home and I went to Camp Pickett, Virginia. There was, I happened to be one of the guys that went to school with me was in the same service with me. So he was gone to Camp Pickett, Virginia too. So, and we knew a couple of other guys that was in Camp Gordon. One of the guys had a car, so he picked us all up and we went to Camp Gordon, Virginia. And my buddy was gone with her girlfriend. my wife's girlfriend, and lived the next street over. So while we were in Camp Pickett, Virginia, I was in there for, I don't know, 2 months or so. And her and her girlfriend drove down to Camp Pickett, Virginia, and I got a 3-day pass. And we went to Richmond, Virginia, and while she was down there, we went to square dances and everything down there. And her mother let her go with me because she knew she was in love with me. Because she must have been, all that time I was gone, she missed me. So that's when her mother started let me see her and all that. So she went down there, and then I came home from Camp Pickett, and I was shipped to San Antonio, Texas, at the Brooks Army Hospital. And it was it was Fort Houston, Texas. But that was where Brooks Army Hospital was. That's where your mom was born. So after I realized I was going to be there for the rest of my year and a half in the service, me and my wife talked about, let's get married, and I'll bring you down here to the station with me. Because when I was in the service there, when everybody was shipping out, they had a list of where you were going to go. And all these guys, some were going to Germany, some were going to Korea. And I looked at all these lists, and I went to the sergeant, and I says, my name's not on any lists at all. He says, well, I was studying you, and we need 2 or 3 guys to go. They needed about 15 guys to go to San Antonio to teach the officers, the doctors, on how to run a MASH hospital. So you're gonna be one of the cadre. The cadre was a people training. So we had to train these doctors on how to run a MASH. If somebody got wounded, what happens to him at all the time? You know, they go to a regular company, and then they evaluate them. Then they go to the battalion headquarters, and if they're still too bad, they would send them to a hospital ship. And then from there, they go to the States. If somebody was wounded too bad, they won't be able to go. If they were going back to the front to fight, then they'd send them back. But I was there a year and a half in San Antonio, and anyhow, I came back. I went down there in February. And in Camp Pickett, Virginia, there was snow galore there and all that. So when I got off the plane in San Antonio, I get off the plane and the sky was nice and clear. It was in the evening, and beautiful weather. It was warm. And I said, well, this is nice. So then when I found out I was going to be stationed there, I talked to my wife, to see if she wanted to get married. And she talked to her mom and all. So my mom and dad didn't have that much money. They were going to have a wedding, so they sold a bunch of their insurance policies. And they had a little party at home. Really. So then we went on a train to go to San Antonio when I got stationed. and we rented an apartment right outside the base. And then we were there for about 2 or 3 months. And one of my buddies he was already married, and he wanted to bring his wife down. He was working with me. So I said, well, let's go see if we get an apartment together. We can ride to work back and forth. So we did, and we got one on Houston Avenue. And it was a duplex. And only thing that was touching, there was 2 bedrooms in each apartment, and the only thing that was touching each one was our bathrooms. And we'd open the medicine cabinet, and we could talk to each other through the medicine cabinet. So he said, "You ready to go to work?" Yeah, we're up. So I'll be there. And we used to ride back and forth to work. So your mom, Pat, was born in San Antonio, in Fort Sam Houston, or Brooke Army Hospital. And she was born in May 23rd. She was the oldest of them. And she was about May, June, July, August, September. She was 4 months old when we drove back home. And at that time, I was promoted from private to PFC, private first class, and then I was a corporal. I was a platoon leader. And being that I was a non-commissioned officer, they shipped all my furniture and clothes back to Masontown, free of charge. They come in and packed all the clothes when they moved, and they shipped it home. So we went home, and we stayed with her parents for about a month or two. Then my aunt had these apartments, and we rented one of the apartments. We stayed there for, I don't know how many years. It was from 55. I was discharged in September 55, and I was drafted in September 53. And and let's see what happened after that. So anyhow, we had Patty was the oldest. Then a year and a half later, Roberta was born. And then, let's see, that'd be about 5 years later, the twins were born. When I got home, I didn't have a job, and our bus line, my brother was running the bus line and taxis. I was driving taxis in the evening. Oh, we had a taxi driver. My dad drove till 6 o'clock at night. Then his taxi driver would run it. So we didn't want to lay anybody off, so I decided to go to electrician school under G.I. Bill. So I was collecting unemployment, $35 a week, and we had your mom, so we had to take care of your mom. And I was going to school during the day, and then in the evening I drove taxi once in a while. And then this one taxi driver we had, he got ill and everything, so I started driving taxi in the evening. But after that, Roberta was born in September of it must have been 56. And then it was 57. The twins were born,
Mm-hmm.
Robin and Robert.
Mm-hmm.
Butch, we used to call him. So at that time, there was a guy who used to ride a bus. Meantime, we got rid of the buses because everybody had cars after the war, and the bus business was not too good. So we shut the bus line down. So my brother left me. He went to work in the steel mills near Pittsburgh. So I was still there with my dad, and I was running the taxis. And my dad couldn't drive no more. He was getting older, and we didn't want him to drive. So I hired someone else to. Well, actually, my wife's brother. I had him driving taxis at night, and this way I was able to go to school. And I was working for Masontown Bus Line. There was another company. My dad had partnerships in Masontown Bus Line.
Mm-hmm.
Then he had the Schiavoni Bus Line, and I was a mechanic. The one mechanic worked for the bus line over there, and that's the only way I lived. But at that time, we was only making $1.10 an hour. Okay, driving buses and working to as a mechanic, whatever. Then, when the twins were born, I had one of the guys that used to ride the buses told me that. Meantime, I graduated from the electrician school. So I was going to try to get a job as an electrician. So this guy he had a friend that was a personnel manager in Cleveland of Republic Steel. So I figured out, he said, maybe I can get you in up there. So he arranged an interview. So I went to Cleveland and took an interview. And the guy says, he gave me all kind of tests and everything, and he says that I could hire him. He was going to hire me, and I was supposed to work that Monday following. He calls me up on a Friday and told me that he can't hire me because they're on strike, and they can't hire anybody new while they were on strike. The union wouldn't allow it because they weren't supposed to be working. So I had to forget about my electrician job, and I went to try to get a mechanic job. So I got a job working for this one. I looked in the paper, and I had 3 different places I could go to. So I called them up, made an appointment, and I went to the first guy, and he hired me. So I started to work. I went to work there early. I brought my tools in there, and I was supposed to be working on cars. And he had me running back and forth to the restaurant for coffee for him. And I said, where am I going to work on the cars? So I didn't like that because he was using me for a gopher. So at 10 o'clock, when I took my break, I took my tools and I left. And I went to this used car lot that I had an application in. And they hired me. So I went in there and I went in and I started working there. I worked there till lunchtime and found out he wanted me to bring my welding torches. He wanted me to bring all my equipment there to work on these cars in a used car lot. And I didn't like the surroundings there. So when I went to lunch, I took my tools with me. I didn't go back. And then I went to this Chevy dealer. They were looking for a mechanic for trucks at the Chevy dealer, and we're going to be in second shift at night. And I took an application there and took a test, and they said I could work there. So I left there about, I don't know, 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. And I took an application there and everything. And I was staying at my sister-in-law's at that time.
Mm-hmm.
That was my wife's sister. I was staying there in Cleveland. And meantime, my family, the twins were just born. So I couldn't leave. So I left them in Masontown. And I was traveling back and forth on the weekends. And I went and took that application at that Chevy garage. And then I left. And I went back to my sister-in-law's. And she says, "Where you been all day?" I says, "Why?" She said, "I had 3 different companies saying you were there working and you didn't come back after your breaks." I said I didn't like him. And he says, "The Chevy garage says that you got a job. You can work there." I said, "Okay," because that was down the street from there in Cleveland Heights. So I said, "Okay," so I worked there. And I went to start there the first day. They went on strike. So I couldn't work there no more. That was back in 62 or, yeah, about 62, 63, 1963. And I says, "Oh," so I says, "Well, I'm going to have to get a job somewhere." So I went to work. Next day I went, filled in an application at this Ryan Motors Exchange, where they rebuilt motors and transmissions. And I went there, and I got worked. I got a flat rate. I was making, at that time, was big money, $3 or $4 an hour or something at that time. And I was making good money rebuilding engines. Customer would come in, I'd tear the engine out of the car. They had all the power equipment and all. I would have the engine laying out on the floor within maybe an hour. Had the whole front end. At that time, you loosen the bolts on the fender, loosen the bolts on the radiator frame, and disconnect the wires for the headlights, and you could take that whole front end out with the electric lift. Took the whole front end out, and you could work on the motor right there. Everything was all electric power tools. And I was making good money. I'd work only 4 days. On Thursdays, I'd leave, go back to Pennsylvania, and help my wife with the twins because they were just born. And then I was working on, I don't know, maybe 2 months, making good money. And I was working on this guy's car. And I'm laying under the car, working on his car. And the guy that owned the car, it was a Lincoln. He says, he started asking me about his car. And I said, "I'm putting it together now. And the motor's been rebuilt and everything, and transmission, we worked on the clutch and put new clutch and all that in." He said, "Okay." And as he was asking me questions about the car, I was laying under the car and somebody kicked me on the foot. And here was my boss. And he said, "Hi, Mr. Gordon," whatever his name was. I forget his name. And he's talking about him, telling him about his car. Then he took him in the corner of the garage and he was showing him these old pistons and old clutches from another car. They're all rusted and wore out and everything. And he's telling him that was coming from his car. And I knew that wasn't, and I was listening to him. Then he come back and he was chewing me out. He says, when you're talking, don't talk to the customers about their car. I said, well, he just wanted to know how the car. He says, don't tell them nothing. He said, tell them you don't know nothing about it. I said, I'm working on a guy's car, and I don't know what's the matter with it. What kind of mechanic am I? So I didn't like it, so I quit.
Mm-hmm.
Picked up my tools and went home. And then I got a job at this Chrysler DeSoto Plymouth dealer in Cleveland Heights. It was a steady job, and I worked there, I don't know, about 2 years, something like that. In the meantime, I brought my children and wife, and I rented this apartment next door to my sister-in-law. So we lived there for about 2 years, and I went to work at this Chrysler Plymouth job, the dealer, and come raise time, they give me 10 cents on an hour raise. And I says, I was supposed to be on flat rate. I'm waiting to get on a flat rate, so they pay you by the hour, you know. And you got, if you worked on a guy's tune-up and all, that job paid so much. Let's say they allow you 2 hours on that job. Well, you got that money for that 2 hours. If it only took you an hour, it's don't matter. You still got paid for that job. It was a flat rate.
Mm-hmm.
You got so much they allowed on a book. And if you got it done in an hour, it's your problem. But if anything came back, you had to do it on your own time. But I never had anything come back.
Mm-hmm.
Same way with that other transmission job. Anything come back, I didn't have to worry. I had no comebacks. I took my time and did a good job on everything.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow, I didn't like that because it wasn't paying that much money. And I got all over the service manager because I wasn't making the money. He promised me to get flat rate. But I was working on, when somebody buy a new car, I'd have to get the new car ready to go out. I'd tune it up, put the hubcaps and everything on it, put the antenna on. At that time, when the new cars come in, everything was in the trunk. And you put the hubcaps on the antenna, and you took it out for a road test. Any squeaks or anything around, you took care of it. So I didn't like that. So I got a job. I applied for a job at American Greeting and IBM. And each one of those, I had to take a test, psychology test, everything, all day long. Each one of those places. So come on a Friday, American Greeting said that I could start work that's following Monday. And I said, okay. And then IBM on that Friday called me up and told me I could work for them. Only thing is, I had to go to the college you went to.
Bowling Green.
Bowling Green. I had to go to Bowling Green for 3 months to learn the vacuum tubes. You know, the tubes they had in radios and televisions and all that. I had to go to the Bowling Green for 3 hours, and my wife just had the twins were only 2 years old at the time, and she had all the. I couldn't leave my wife with all these kids to take care of. So I turned that job down and went to American Greeting. So I worked American Greeting for about 10 years. And Meantime, Annette was born 5 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, then I moved from East Cleveland. I moved to the West Side. I was living over at by Denison Avenue, Denison and 52nd and Denison by the zoo, and I lived there for about 2 or 3 years. Then I bought this home at Brook Park,
Mm-hmm.
and when I was there, Annette was born, and she was born in Parma Hospital. She was the youngest. And then while I was living in Brook Park, my father died. So I had to go back home to the funeral. And while I was there in the funeral, my wife, Helen, she had terrible back pains. And she couldn't go to the hospital. She couldn't go to the funeral. So she stayed at my mother's house at that time. And as soon as we come out of the funeral, we come back to Cleveland. I took her right to the hospital because she was in terrible pain. And she had just had the baby in June. And this was in November, right? A week before Thanksgiving. And I put her in the hospital, and they told her if I was at the funeral back PA that I should call and tell them to go get a shot because they thought my wife had hepatitis because her eyes were jaundiced, and they thought she had hepatitis. So I called back and told them they should get a shot for this hepatitis because they were in contact with her. She was in the hospital just 2 or 3 days, and they had to open her up because to see what was the matter with her, and they found out she had the pancreatic cancer. Then they closed her back up again. Then they told me she was only going to last. I said, how long? And they said, days, months, I don't know. And she lasted maybe 4 weeks, not even a month. And she died on the 22nd of November, same day that Kennedy was assassinated.
Wow.
2 years later. That's how I remember when she died. And she had her funeral on the weekend of Thanksgiving. So we were living in Brook Park at the time, and my sister came from PA to live with us to help take care of her. To help take care of her, take care of the family. She lived with us and her family, so I got her husband a job at American Greeting. And I also got my brother a job a year before that at American Greeting. So I had brought two of my brother and my brother-in-law a job in American Greeting. Brought them to Cleveland. So my sister was a big help for me. So for about 2 years. And that's where I met my other wife, Joyce, at American Greeting. She was working there, and we had an open house in there, so I invited her to come over to my place. And she met my children and all, and I said, well, let's go to the open house together. the marriage greeting. So we went to the marriage greeting. So that was my first date. And she would never go out with me without the kids. If we went someplace to a drive-in or something, the kids had to come along. So she wouldn't go unless I had the kids with me. She loved the kids. And 5 years previous to that, I was 32 years old at that time. And my wife was only 26. Yeah, she was 26 at that time. And she had a son. She was married, and her husband used to beat her a lot. And she lost her son was born and only lived 2 days and he died. So she had problems when she was, I think, 17 years old. She ended up in the hospital for 9 months because she had a kidney disease. It was cirrhosis. No, she had, what do you call it? She had a kidney disease. And her parents, they didn't think she was going to live. They were going to put her on dialysis and all that. But she was in the hospital 9 months. And when she was 19. And then she was working at restaurants and all that, and she got married. Anyhow, when she got her divorce, when the baby died, she got a divorce from her husband. And then she went to work at Marriott Greeting. And she was working on one of the machines that I was taking care of. I was taking care of about 5 or 6 different machines. And I just, everybody was talking to me. She's single. Why don't you go get her? And no, I'm not interested in it. And all the guys were talking to her. Why don't you go with Bob? He's single. He's a widow. And I said, no. And I always thought she was stuck up. I never fooled around with anybody at work and all. Well, I was going with a girl at that time. But a bunch of the girls got together and told my wife, we'll give you $5 a piece if you can take him away from this girl. Because they didn't like that girl. So I says, well. So anyhow, I dated her. One time I went to that open house. And she met the kids and all, and she liked the kids. And she'd come over the house every once in a while. So I stopped going with this other girl and I started dating her. And the kids talked her into getting married to me. I never even thought about it because my sister was there taking care of, helped me take care of her. But my sister wanted to go on her own, but buy a new house, just a couple of houses away from me. She bought the house. So my sister moved away, and then my mom stayed with me to help taking care of my kids there while I was working. And my wife at that time was my girlfriend. She was coming over once in a while, and she would. I was telling her to come and live with me. She said no. She stayed overnight a couple times with me, and she slept at the foot of my bed, right across from my mom's room. And we left the door open all the time. We never fooled. And like I say, anytime we went out, the kids had to come with us. And the kids talked her into getting married. Your mom bought one of these cheap rings, that one of those cracker back boxes you get. This is an engagement ring. And so then I proposed to her, and I said, would you want to get married? She says, Yeah, I'll go. Yeah, I can get married, but I'm not going to live with you. So in the meantime, my mom had to go back with my sister, and we had this woman come in and take care of the kids during the day, and she was a what you call a half breed, half colored, half white, whatever. And when my wife seen what she was like, she had a kid. She smoked a lot, and she didn't like the way the kids were being. That's what she talked about. Yeah, I'll get married, but I'm not going to live with you. So that's when we decided to get married. And we got married, and we lived in Brook Park for another couple of years. Then we moved to Brunswick. Uh, yeah, we lived in Brunswick at one house for about 5 years. Then we bought a property in Hinkley, and about 4 acres in Hinkley. And we built a lake in there, and then we built a house. And then we lived there for, we was there for, built a big lake there. Well, you know the lake.
Mm-hmm.
Used to fish there a lot. And my buddy used to ride with me. He had horses, and we used to go. He used to pick me up. We would go to work together, and he lived in Medina somewhere, southern Medina. Uh, uh, we were on second shift at the time. I was a superintendent at Boise Cascade, and one time we stopped at the bar, and before I went home, and he was talking about one of the guys at work had this horse down in his barn, but he wasn't paying rent no more. He wasn't going to get rid of it. He never goes down to see the horses or nothing. And he told me he was going to sell that horse. And I said, well, how much does he owe you? He says, $100 just to pay for the food I've been feeding him. You could have him if you want him. So I bought the horse, but I didn't have no barn, so I had to go build a barn. So he helped me build the barn, and he lived down below you guys, Jim Moonmount. What's the name of that? Right around 83.
Chatham?
Near there, but we're 71 and 83.
Lodi?
I think it was Lodi. But on Friendsville Road. You know where Friendsville.
Oh, yeah.
He had a farm down there. So we used to go down there and ride the horses, and I was helping him. And he helped me build this barn. We built this barn up in Hinkley. And we had the barn almost all the way built. And I built the stalls and everything. And I only had half the roof up. And I brought the horse up in Hinkley where I could take care of it now. Then I finished the rest of the barn while he was there. But the horse was cheap, but I had to build a barn now. So anyhow, well, you remember Duke.
Mm-hmm.
I used to let you ride Duke once in a while. So that's when we started with the horses. And that was a Tennessee Walker. Beautiful horse for riding. And I had that lake I built there. And then we bought another horse. Yeah, we bought another horse. Then Annette wanted to start showing horses. So she joined the 4-H
Mm-hmm.
and she started showing the horses. And this Duke, who was a Tennessee Walker, and they recommended her getting a different type of horse for showing because he always going to that 5 gate, like this and all. And he wasn't too good. He had a mind of his own. So we bought a American saddlebred, and we had a trainer come in and work with her on that in our barn, and she was training her to show. And every weekend we loaded them up and went to the horse shows all the time. So that kept her busy all the time. And she started pinning pretty good on those horses. And that American Saddlebred was a real hot horse. He would show beautiful long as he was gone, but then he was so wild when they had different bits. When I was riding on a trail, I used to go trail riding. I'd have Duke and she would ride him. Or she would ride Duke and I'd ride him. With the regular snaffle bit, he was okay. But when you put the show bit on him, he would arch his tail would come up and he did his 5 gates. And he would be real wild. His nostrils would open up real good. Well, when the judge would say, stand in line, so they'd go check confirmation of the horse and how he stood and all that. He had to stand perfect with his head back and all that. And he would only stand there a few seconds. She'd have to walk him around. And that trainer, the judge told me that you should get a horse that's not so hot. He's too hot for her. He won't stand still. But he shows beautiful. So she recommended a saddlebred. An Arabian, half Arabian horse. So she knew somebody that had one for sale. So we went and bought this horse, this Arabian, and she would go to this trainer up in Hinckley there. We'd trailer the horse up there and she'd ride it and show the horse. Then we start renting the barn where she was training, and she would train her there. But she was pinning all the time, that horse. Then we didn't know that when we bought that horse horse was pregnant. And we didn't know that. And the owner didn't know it either. So now we had that other horse, that she came. In the meantime, we had several other horses. We had a couple of foals and everything, and I sold the other ones. But when this horse was born, Annette wanted to show that horse. It was a little stallion that was Spanky.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she graduated high school and everything, she went to nursing school over in Lorraine. She went to college. And she met Paul, Uncle Paul. And you could see she wasn't taking care of her horse anymore. She didn't like it. Anyhow, she got married. But we still had Maya, that one horse of hers that we bought. And we had the other one, the baby, Spanky. And they were both gray. They call them grays because once they're about 2 or 3 years old, they turn white.
Mm-hmm.
But they call them grays because he was pitch black when we first got him.
Mm-hmm.
He was beautiful. And she was showing him just at halter, and she was pinning all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So anyhow, she got married, and we told her we're going to have to sell those horses, because she wasn't coming over. She'd come over every evening to feed the horse.
Mm-hmm.
But she got married, okay, and they come home from the honeymoon. They went to Hawaii for a honeymoon, and when they come back, she'd come over to feed the horse. But we'd be in bed, and she'd climb in bed with us. And I said, aren't you going to go home? And Uncle Paul would call and say, is Annette over there? Yeah, she's right in bed with us. She said, she coming home? She forgot that she was married. So she'd come home in the evening, and sometimes she'd climb in bed with us and forget to go home. And she'd go home. But anyhow, later on, we told her we're going to have to sell the horses because she's not taking. So he had a barn over their house where they lived. So he fixed a couple stalls up he brought both of the horses over there. So meantime, Maya, she had died there. And they buried her. She was 26 years old at the time, or something like that. And all she had was Spanky. So that barn, the insurance man told him that barn was falling apart, leaning and all, that he wasn't going to insure that barn. So he brought the horse down to Mother's house. They had a barn installed. So he brought the horse down to the Mother's place, just 1 block away, So they kept that horse down there. And he lived 32 years old. He was an old horse. And he finally died. So we buried him next to Maya. Well, we buried him over at Mother's barn.
Well, why don't we take a break right here?
Okay.
And then we'll start it back up.